Hey everyone, this is a follow-up video to my monitor tube swap video. So if you haven't watched that, I'll put a link in the description below. You should check out that video because I'm going to talk about this monitor here, which has been the recipient of a tube swap. What we have here is my Commodore 2002 monitor, which was the recipient of the CRT out of that 1084. And when this CRT was in that other monitor, it had a couple issues. One was a sharpness problem where, especially in the center of the picture, it wasn't very sharp when I had the brightness turned up. And then the other issue was the color rendering. It was just not good. Actually, on the other monitor, it just had a bad color balance, and it also looked really washed out and not good. What's funny is in this monitor, the sharpness issue seems to have gone away. The screen's a little dimmer than I would like, but it's not bad. But the color issues still persist. And I'm going to use my Tektronix video test pattern generator here, and it's hooked up through the S-Video output, so we're using the Chroma Luma input onto this monitor, which is the best I can do because the RGB input is broken on this, so I can't use the RGB signal from here on this particular monitor. So when we take a look at this color bars here, everything on first appearance looks okay. It's not terrible. Now let's switch to some of the other test patterns and we can get a picture of what's really going on here. So this matrix pattern is starting to show a little bit of what's wrong here. Got the color bars at the top and that looks okay, but this part here should be a nice neutral gray, and it has a bit of an of a red cast. And the same thing is going on here. The whites are okay, but this should just be a dark gray, and it's almost has a brownish red hue to it. Looking here at the grayscale steps, we really see the problem. The white here looks fine. This is starting to have a little bit of a red cast to it, but as the grayscale goes down here, it gets worse and worse. And the weird thing is this CRT had this performance in the other monitor as well. So when this picture tube was in the 1084, it had a similar issue. So this is something to do with the performance of this picture tube and the red guns. But luckily, CRTs have adjustments to hopefully allow us to compensate for this issue. And what I want to try to do is at least get this grayscale back to looking gray again, which will mean this monitor will be more useful to me.
So CRTs typically have two sets of controls for adjusting color. They typically have an RGB drive, or sometimes labeled bias controls, and these are potentiometers that adjust the overall color, but specifically the white color of the screen. So if you adjust, say, the R bias or R drive, the white color will suddenly get a pink tint to it, but so will all the other parts of the color, like from dark to light. Then there's also an RGB cut or cutoff control, and these potentiometers adjust the grayscale portion. So if you think about it, if you have a color ramp from bright red to black, the grayscale is that middle section. And of course, when you combine the RGB together, you get white or gray. And turning the B cut or cutoff control will control how much blue color is added to that middle section of the grayscale ramp. These controls are typically found on the neck board, which is that little circuit board that connects to the back of the CRT. They may also be found on the main logic board though, so you kind of have to look around for them, and they should be labeled.
Now when we take the back of the cover off and we're looking for those controls, typically they're on the neck board. So this was the neck board which I have taken off the CRT. So I popped the cover off on this neck board and you can see the controls inside here. So these are the cut controls. You have red, green, and blue. And it doesn't say cut on them, but I happen to look in the service manual, so I know that's what those are. And over here we have the two drive controls. Now remember I said there would be RGB, and we're only seeing two. There's an R drive and a G drive, so there's no blue drive. But some monitors, that's a fixed amount, like one of the colors is fixed and you have to adjust the other ones, plus or minus of the fixed one. One of the other things that's funny is now that we took this off, I can see through these potentiometers, and you see when I move my thumb there are actually holes for the controls, and if I had just looked more carefully I would have seen them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a marker to label these because that's labeled on the other side, so I will know which ones to adjust, and we're going to start fiddling. Alright, the neck board is back on and I've labeled it, so let's take a look at the controls we have at our disposal for adjustment. We have the BGR cut control. So remember, this is sort of that middle grayscale center part of the color. And we have the G and the R drive, so green and red drive. That's the overall intensity of those two guns. Other controls that we have at our disposal are on the flyback transformer, which is right here. The top one is labeled focus, so this is the focus control for the overall screen. You definitely can adjust this to make sure, you know, say your picture's a little bit out of focus, can drift, and I actually did need to adjust it when I put this CRT in versus the original one. So focus is on the top typically, and then you have this screen control.
The screen adjustment found on the flyback transformer is also called the G2 voltage control. It adjusts the overall screen brightness similar to the monitor's normal brightness control. It's a little different though, because as a CRT ages, you might not be able to make it bright enough by turning the brightness all the way up. So adjusting the screen control can actually brighten the CRT a little bit. Unfortunately, if the CRT is very worn out, turning the brightness up too much via the screen control will just make it blurry and unable to get sharp.
I'm going to use a plastic adjustment tool to make all my changes to the monitor. So this is just pure plastic. It won't conduct any electricity. One thing to keep in mind is sometimes there's a little bit of glue on these controls, especially on the flyback transformer, because this is all set at the factory. So you might need to use, with the monitor off, use a stronger screwdriver and stick it on the flyback transformer on those two adjustments and turn them to break the glue. Now here we are on the grayscale ramp. That's what this is called. I'm happy with the way I have the screen and the brightness control set, so we're going to leave that as is for now. And I'm going to start fiddling around with some of the other controls, and we'll look at how it changes the picture. Okay, I have my adjustment tool in the R drive potentiometer, and when I turn this back and forth, it affects the overall picture. And you see it is cutting down on the red in this middle section, but it's also making the white kind of bluish. And I don't like that. That's changing the overall color balance. I think this is not the right way to fix this middle section. So I'm going to turn that back to where the bright white looks pleasing. You know, this is a nice warmish color. And let's put it in the G drive next. Okay, now I have it in the G drive control, and it's similar. You know, it's affecting the overall green picture content of everything here. So it's really changing all of this, including the white. If I turn up too much, now this looks kind of a greenish, you know, tint, and I don't really like that either. The white color balance was actually pretty good as it was. So I'm just going to adjust it where this white looks pretty nice. I'd say that's decent. And now let's move on to those cut controls. Okay, so I'm on the R cut. And I think that's going to make a big difference right off the bat. Let me turn this down. So when I turn the R cut down, this gray is starting to look a lot nicer now. It's losing that orange cast, and it is affecting the overall white. So these controls are interrelated. But one thing that did happen is this lowest gray down here disappeared. And this was sort of a reddish tint, and that was it. So I think what that means is that the drive, the red drive, is just too high. So I'm going to lower that a little bit, and then I'm going to turn the overall screen control up, which hopefully should restore this and make it look a little bit more gray. So let's first of all turn down the red. So what's happening is I'm adjusting the monitor, and it's not doing exactly what I thought it should be doing. I haven't adjusted a lot, but the controls are acting a little strange, and I think this is actually indicative of the CRT being worn out. So I'm taking a new tactic. I've set my pattern generator to just output black, and I've turned the screen control up so we can just see this kind of reddish tint that we're still getting here. And I'm going to try to tune this out. Like I'm going to try to turn the red cut down so this goes away, or maybe turn the other ones up to kind of even this out. And then we're going to go back and see about the other colors. So I'm just fiddling with the controls to try to get this look as, you know, natural as I think it should be. It still looks a little reddish in the camera, but to my eyes, it's definitely a little bit better. It's on the gray side. I'm going to turn the blue up just a tad more. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So let me turn the screen control down and just let's look at how screwed up everything else looks. Okay, so I've set my pattern generator to give us a 50% gray, and I gotta say this looks too green to me. And that's brighter, and that's also a bit too green. So maybe I need to turn the green drive down a little bit. Let's do that. Okay, that's better. And the middle one looks better too. Let's put the grayscale ramp on and see how this looks. Okay, things are looking better, but not great. Couple interesting observations here is this grayscale that's visible to me, it's hard to see in the camera, that's still a little reddish. These look better. They are not nearly as red casted as they were. First we'll set it to a black output. There we are, and I'm going to turn the brightness up a little bit here. It looks fine gray here, but as I get right near the bottom, it's now kind of reddish again. You can just sort of make that out of the camera. I think I'm going to turn the red cut down a bit more. That's a lot better now. So that gray looks fine, and all the way down to the bottom, it's not too bad now. So I'm going to set the brightness control back down to the center notch, and then I'm going to adjust the screen control to just get it where I'm just starting to see blackness. Okay, so brightness here is in the middle, and I'm tweaking the screen control. Okay, so now it's looking pretty good. Now let's look at the steps. Yes, okay. Huge improvement. I mean, I cannot tell you how much better this is looking already. Huge. Let's take a look at the matrix. Okay, this is the matrix view, so where we had a combination of things. And remember when we first looked at it, this gray had a really horrible red cast in it. But you know what? Now this is looking way better. Now keep in mind that as far as the colors go, it's hard to adjust those when you're not using RGB signal, because at least American monitors here in the US and Canada with NTSC, there is a tint and a hue control. And you see as I turn that, it obviously visibly affects how these colors are rendered. But if you notice, the whites are unaffected by that. So that's why when adjusting, and when you're on the ramps with those grayscale, that's really the way you have to do the color balance adjustments. So at this point, I'm actually rather shocked how good this CRT looks in this chassis. It's weird how clear it is compared to how it was in the other one. I'm getting a little bit of uniformity issues. And you see down here there's a little bit of a dark spot. This is coming from some like magnet, it's magnetized in some way. Maybe that's to do with those magnets that I took off the screen. I'm not too sure, but it's not perfect, but you know what? It's not that bad either. There's something else I'm noticing here, looking at these color fields. This CRT actually has some burn-in. And I can see right here, there's a pretty definite line where it's darker on one side than the other. So I'm assuming that whatever this monitor did a lot of displaying of, which was originally used in video production, perhaps it had a white border around the screen, because it looks darker over here. There's a line there, there's a line here, and there's just a very faint line on the top. So I have a feeling that maybe the central part of the screen had maybe varied contents, while the edges was just a white border. Now looking at the ramp again, it's looking way better, but it's still a little red there on this one. Let me zoom in. It's gonna be hard to see in the camera, but it's just got the ever so slightest red tint still, and that's still bothering me. So I'm just gonna fiddle with it and see if I can get this out of here. That's about as good as I can get it right now, so I'm gonna stop fiddling with it. It looks pretty good to me, so let's put it back together. So I put the lid back on, and one thing that's interesting about this monitor, and it's a problem that existed before this CRT swap, is there's a bit of a light band in the picture right through here, and it's visible on only certain colors. Like the blue you don't see it, but the red you can see this, and on certain gray you can see it as well. Actually it looks fine there, but yep, there's just certain times when you're looking at something on here and you see it's a bit brighter through here. But there's just something wrong with this particular monitor. Something I really like about the 2002, or actually I think this series of Commodore monitors, there's 1084s and other variants that look like this, is that the control for the input is on the front. So between RGB, composite, video, or Chroma Luma is all selectable here. And while that's important on the Apple II, as you can see here, we're in Oregon Trail, color's looking fine, But if I switch the switch to the middle position, while we still have some color, we're actually looking at the much higher resolution kind of monochrome mode. And let me zoom in here. See how sharp the text is and everything here? And Apple IIs use artifact color, sorry for that bar, but there's the color bars that would basically create the color. When you're looking on a monochrome screen, all you see is these lines. Of course, there's no color. But if I flip the switch to the side, we actually have color now. Of course, you do see a little bit of the lines. It's almost like the sharpness is too high on this particular monitor. But yep, it's nice that you can kind of select between those two and look at the text here. Look how much sharper it gets. Oops, that was the wrong setting. In the middle, you see the M, it's very clear. And here to there. Being able to make that switch is especially helpful when you're in the text mode on the Apple II. Let me zoom in here. Because that's pretty sharp text there. Now, if I switch it over to the color mode, it's actually picking up, and erroneously, it's picking up the artifact color. Shouldn't do that now. It's weird. If I click it over, it actually takes a second. Watch, click. See, it should just be fine. The Apple II is not sending a color burst signal when it's in text mode like this. It only does it when it goes into graphics mode like this, which actually is funny because the text looks sharper here. If I switch back to the middle setting, there we go. That's without the colors being filtered. There it looks fine. But odd is that when we exit out, look how screwed up the text looks. It's really hard to read. But we enter graphics mode and it actually makes it look better. But anyways, that's probably some idiosyncrasy of this particular monitor, but I can just flip it into, you know, S-video mode, but I don't have a chroma connection hooked up, so it actually looks nice and sharp. See, look at that, nice. So it's a pretty good monitor for Apple IIs, and now that I fixed the horrible color rendition, this looks pretty nice. Ooh, dazzle draw, look at that double high-res graphics. Well, here we are on the Commodore 64, and I have to say I'm pretty impressed with how nice this looks. This is one of my sharper C64s. This is a later bread bin, which has a very, very nice, clear S-video style output. Some of my other bread bins are very fuzzy. This one looks fantastic, and the color looks great. Well, there you go. I hope you found it interesting, because I sure did. I am shocked that this monitor tuned up to be something that's actually really nice and pleasant to use. This demo right here, when I first ran it with this CRT, once I had swapped it in, the gray writing here had that horrible reddish cast and it just looked terrible. But now the Commodore 64 gray here actually looks good. And this monitor is really sharp and works well with the Apple II, other than that strange color issue on the text. But nothing you can't fix with that switch. So yeah, if you have a monitor that looks out of whack with the color balance, know that those controls are in there and you can adjust them, and maybe you can get it looking good again. Anyhow, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Gives me a thumbs up if you liked this video, and put your comments and questions in the comment section below. And there we go. I'll see you next time. Bye.